Okay guys, today in math we're going to be working on chapter 10, lesson 7, so you should be open to page 669 in your book. What we're going to be doing today is we're going to be comparing and ordering decimals. So that means we're going to compare by saying which one's greater, which one's least, and which one's less, and then we're going to be ordering, which means we may be putting decimals in order from greatest to least or least to greatest. So really quick, we haven't done this in a while. Let's practice ordering whole numbers because it's going to be basically the same as, we're going to be looking at the same things when we order decimals. So right now I have four numbers, 62, 71, 65, and 69, and I want to put them in order from greatest to least. So remember, to do that, I look at the digits in each place value, and I start with the greatest place value. Not the smallest, but the greatest. So in all four of these numbers, the greatest place value is the tens place. So we have a 6, a 7, another 6, and another 6. So if we want to order from greatest to least, then we need to find the digit that is the greatest in the tens place. And we have a 6, a 7, a 6, and a 6. So obviously, this 7 is the greatest, which means this number 71 is the greatest. There's only one 7, so we know right away. So we've got that one, we're done with it. Now we have to put the rest of them in order. So we need to find out what the next greatest number is after 71. Well, we looked at the tens place, and we have a 6 in each one, so that won't help us. So now we need to look at the ones place. If we're ordering from greatest to least, now we need to find the greatest number in the greatest digit in the ones place, which is this 9. So that means 69 comes next. Now we need to look for the number that comes next. Is 5 or 2 greater? Well, 5 is greater, which means 65 comes next, and we only have one number left. So that means 62 goes at the end. So remember, you're looking at place value and you're looking at the digits in each place value. You always start with the greatest place value. So now, let's get to the book. First, I don't have it up on the board because it wouldn't all fit, but go ahead and read that sentence underneath the title with me as I read it out loud. And it says, to compare decimals, you can use a number line or place value. We did both of those when we compared whole numbers. We used number lines and we used place value. Now, finger and pencil on example 1. Read in your head while I read out loud. At recess, Austin and his friends decided to have 2 races. One was 2/10 of a mile, and the other was 4/10 of a mile. Which race was longer? So we are trying to compare 2/10 and 4/10 and figure out which one is greater, because greater and longer are synonyms. So one way is to use a number line. Here's our number line. We have 0, we have 1, and then in between they've broken it up into 10 pieces. Oops. So we have 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, 5/10, 6/10, 7/10, 8/10, and 9/10. So let's graph both 4/10 and 2/10. Well, here's 4/10, and here's 2/10. 4/10 is to the right of 2/10, and it's closer to 1 whole. So that means that 4/10 is greater than 2/10. Because remember, when we're using a number line, as we go to the right, the numbers get larger or greater. Also, we know that this is broken, the 1 whole is broken into 10 pieces, and the 4/10 is closer to 1 whole. Okay, now another way is to use place value. This is where we use our place value chart and we line up the numbers and see which ones are greater or less. So we line up the digits, So what we're going to do is first we're going to line up the decimal points. And then we'll write the digits of our decimals in each place. We know that we have no holes and we have 2/10 and 4/10. We have a 0, so remember when we compare numbers, we start with using place value, we start in the greatest place value. Well, the greatest place value for these numbers is the ones place, so now we need to look at the digit in the ones place. Well, they're both 0, so we can't compare them. They're the same, so that means we need to go to the next place value. We have a 2 and a 4. A 4 is greater than a 2, so that means 4/10 is greater than 2/10. So the race that was longer was the one that was 4/10 of a mile. Don't forget that unit. Now look at this last sentence. It says, notice you can only compare 4/10 and 2/10 because they refer to the same whole, which is 1 mile. We have 2/10 of a mile and 4/10 of a mile. We could not compare 2/10 of a mile and 4/10 of a foot. That would not work because obviously a foot is smaller, so no matter how much of the foot and how much of the mile we have, the one that's in the foot is most likely going to be smaller. Now I'm going to show you one more way to do this using models. So let's draw, we are working with tenths, so let's draw 2 tenths grids. I'm going to try to make them as close to the same size as possible. Now I'm going to break them each into 10 pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Let's do the same thing with this one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Let me count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Good. So now here I'm going to model 4/10, and here I'm going to model 2/10, and then I'm going to see which one takes up the most space. 4/10 is the same as 4 out of 10, so 1, 2, 3, and 4. 2/10 is the same as 2 out of 10, so 1, 2. Well, if we look at it, we can see that 4/10 takes up a lot more space than 2/10. So that's another way that we can tell that 4/10 is greater than 2/10. Okay, now we're not only working with tenths, we are also going to be looking at hundredths. So go ahead and turn the page, and let's do example 2. Okay, so everybody, finger or pencil on example 2, and read in your head while I read out loud. Order 15 hundredths, 38 hundredths, and 3/10 from greatest to least. So, in this problem, we have decimals with different amounts of digits. Now, you may look and say, well, 3 is less than 38 and 15, but this isn't the same 3 as these. So what you have to do when you're comparing decimals is you have to make sure that all of the decimals have the same number of digits. 15 hundredths and 38 hundredths both have 1, 2, 3 digits. 3/10 only has 1, 2. So in order to change 3/10 so that it has 3 digits, all you do is you put a 0 at the end. You put a 0 at the end, not in the middle, not at the beginning. You put 1 0 at the end. Anytime you're trying to make decimals the same amount of digits, you just put a 0 at the end. So now we don't have 15 hundredths, 38 hundredths, and 3/10. Now we have 15 hundredths, 38 hundredths, and 30 hundredths. So now we just need to compare these numbers. Well, we're ordering them from greatest to least, so that means first we need to look at the very first digit, the greatest digit, which is the ones place. None of these will help me because they're all the same, so I need to move 1 place over to the 10th place. I have a 1, a 3, and a 3. Well, I know 1 is less than 3, so I can go ahead and say that 15 hundredths is the least. I don't even have to worry about the rest of it, because I know that that digit in the 10th place is less than the digit in these 10th place. Now these, I have the same digit in the 10th place, so I can't compare them yet. I need to move 1 place over to the hundredths. Now I have an 8 and a 0. Well, I know that 8 is greater than 0, so that means 38 hundredths is the greatest, and 30 hundredths or 3/10 is right in the middle. Remember, when you're actually putting the answers down, you write it the exact same way they gave you up here. So I'm not going to write 30 hundredths here because that's not the number they gave me. I only put that 0 to help me compare them so that they had the same number of digits. Now we can check using models, and we know we're correct because 15 hundredths, which is the same as 15 out of 100, has a smaller amount of shaded area than 30 hundredths, which is the same as 30 out of 100, and 30 hundredths has a smaller shaded area than 38 hundredths, which is the same as 38 out of 100. Okay, so now that we've looked at both comparing and ordering these fractions, let's move on to the guided practice. Okay, numbers 1 through 4, the directions say compare, use greater than, less than, or equal to. So, remember, these are called inequalities. Go ahead and write that. These are called inequalities because we're showing how they are equal or not equal. Okay, so number 1, we have 2/10 and 6/10. Well, both of these, excuse me, have the same number of digits, so we don't have to worry about adding that invisible 0 anywhere. We know if we look at the place value, well, the digits in the ones place are the same, so we need to move to the tenths. 2 is less than 6, so that means that 2/10 is less than 6/10. Now number 2, we have 4/10 and 4 hundredths. Well, these have a different number of digits, so we need to add an invisible 0 to this first one. Don't forget to add that invisible 0, this 4/10, so that it also has 3 digits like 4 hundredths. So now we have 40 hundredths and 4 hundredths. Our digit in the ones place is the same. If we move to the tenths place, we have a 4 and a 0. We know that a 4 is greater than a 0, so that means that 4/10 is greater than 4 hundredths. We also know, because if we drew a model, we would know that 4 out of 10 is a lot bigger. 4 out of 10 or 40 out of 100 is a lot bigger than 4 out of 100. Now number 3, we have 6/10 and we have 60 hundredths. Those have different digits, so let's add our invisible 0. And now we have 60 hundredths and 60 hundredths. Well, if we look at it, the digits in each place are exactly the same, which means that 6/10 is equal to 60 hundredths. Number 4, we have 57 hundredths and 7/10. Those have those have a different number of digits, so we need to add an invisible 0 to make them both into 3-digit decimals. In our ones place, we have the same digit, so we move to our tenths place, where we have a 5 and a 7. 7 is greater than 5, so that means that 7/10 is greater than 57 hundredths. Okay, now, for the next part of the guided practice, it says order from greatest to least. So what we need to do first is we need to make sure that each number has the same amount of digits. We have 2/10, 2 hundredths, and 4/10. So we need to add an invisible 0 to both of the tenths, and now we have 20 hundredths, 2 hundredths, and 40 hundredths. We have the same digit in each of the ones place, so let's move to the tenths place. We have a 2, a 0, and a 4. Well, we know that 4 is greater than 2 or 0, so that means 4/10 will come first. Remember, we don't write 40 hundredths because that invisible 0 is there only to help us figure out the answer. But the answer has to have 4/10, not 40 hundredths. So we're done with that one. Now let's look. We're still looking at the tenths place. We have a 2 and a 0. Well, we know that 2 is greater than 0, so that means 2/10 has to come next. Remember, we're not writing 20 hundredths. We're writing 2/10. We only have one left. which is 2/100, and we know that 2 out of 100 is a lot less than 20 out of 100 and 40 out of 100. So remember, when you're putting your answers down, do not put that invisible 0. Okay, now number 6, we have 51/100, 34/100, and 46/100. Well, we don't need any invisible zeros because those all have 3 digits. So now we just need to look at the places. Well, the ones place, we have zeros. So we need to move to the tenths place. We have a 5, a 3, and a 4. We know that 5 is greater than 3 or 4, which means that 51/100 has to come first. Now we're still looking at the tenths. We have a 3 and a 4. We know that 4 is greater than 3, so that means 46/100 comes next. And we only have one left, and we know that that was the decimal with the smallest digit in the tenths place, so that means 34/100 is the least. Okay, so we're not going to do any of the independent practice together because it's all the same as what we've done in the examples and the guided practice. Numbers, so look through it with me as I explain where you can look to get some help. Numbers 7 through 15 are just like the guided practice, number 1 through 4. Numbers 16 through 19 are just like numbers 5 and 6 on the guided practice. Numbers 20 through 23, you are using that number line to say whether these inequalities on numbers 20 through 23 are true or false. You should be plotting where those points would fall on that number line in order to check. You can use different colors for each problem, number 20 through 23. Now look at page 672. We have some word problems. Pay attention to what the question is asking. What I mean by that is some of these questions might ask for a word and some might ask for a number. So in number 24, I'm not going to tell you, but it says the distance from Scarlett's house to the elementary school is 3/10 of a mile. The distance from Scarlett's house to the middle school is 9/10 of a mile. Which distance is shorter? Is it asking for a word or a number or both? Sometimes you need a number with a unit. Number 25, on a vegetable tray, 5/10 of the vegetables are carrots and 2/10 of the vegetables are broccoli. Of what vegetable is there more? Are they asking for a word or are they asking for a number? If they say of what vegetable, would you write a word or a number? Pay attention to that both on the independent practice and on the homework. Number 26 and 27 are critical thinking as well as using math. And number 28 is critical thinking. So that's where you get that answer from your brain. You think about it, think about what you learned, think about what you know, put them together to create an answer. Now look at the homework. Numbers 1 through 3 are like numbers 1 through 4 on the guided practice. Numbers 4 and 5 are like numbers 5 and 6 on the guided practice. And then numbers 6 through 8 are real world problems. Make sure, are they asking you for a number, a word, or a number with a unit, which is both? Pay close attention. Do not write a number when the answer calls for a word. Do not write a word when the answer calls for a number. Make sure that you have a number and a word if it's looking for a number with a unit. Number 9, you're creating your own real-world problem. Remember, whenever you create a real-world problem, you also have to say the answer. So don't forget to write the real-world problem, which means you're writing a word problem, and then solve it. And then number 10, you are just choosing which one is correct. Pay attention on all of this. Homework, independent practice. Are they asking for least to greatest or greatest to least? Don't make a silly mistake because you're going too fast. Okay, so that's all for math today. If you have any questions, go ahead and reach out to me between 1 and 5. You can Skype me, FaceTime me, text, whatever. So go ahead, get started on the independent practice, and then you can work on the homework, or you can wait until later this afternoon.